Hayley, my name's Peter. Welcome to Colonia. It's lovely to meet you. If you could just tell me who you are and why you're interested in this sector, and we'll take this from there.
Okay, I'm Hayley van Loon, the CEO of Crime Stoppers International. We're increasingly seeing convergence of crime across all the different crime verticals, whether that be human trafficking, wildlife trafficking, narcotics and illicit trades such as illicit tobacco. So that's my interest in this area.
Okay, so you're Australian.
I am Australian.
I'm getting that from the accent.
Yes,
right?
I am Australian, yep.
So somebody who works in the nicotine industry, my vision of Australia is of this like barren wasteland of gangs selling illicit vapes. That's kind of the vibe that I get from our readers who are Australian and the coverage that we do of Australia.
Right.
Can you maybe like walk me through just kind of the details of how the illicit vape industry works in Australia?
It's very important to delineate here that I'm from Crime Stoppers International, so we work across the globe, not particularly in Australia. Okay. So there is a Crime Stoppers Australia who are independent to us, and they're the ones dealing with the tips and things that are coming in for the Australian issues. However, I can comment on the issues that are happening because I do live in Melbourne, where the majority of the latest coverage has kind of been with the fire bombings and Hamad directing via the IRGC and the prescription of the IRGC and then the expulsion of the Iranian ambassador last year. We're seeing a really interesting phenomena where we're seeing state actors kind of incorporating themselves into or using organised crime gangs to carry out their activities, including the illicit tobacco trade and attacks on Jewish sites such as synagogues and restaurants in Melbourne. So when I mentioned before the crime convergence, that's really the biggest concern we have, is that things are no longer organised crime and state actors. We're seeing a complete convergence of the two, and them using the same networks and facilitation and financing to carry out acts on behalf
of
nation states.
So you mentioned the IRGC, if I understand that correctly. So what's the IRGC's role in illicit tobacco in Melbourne?
Yeah, so they were essentially directing Hamad and his illicit tobacco network in Melbourne. Hamad, so he's now in Iraq. He was extradited to Iraq, but he was still kind of directing the activities.
And who is he?
He's the kingpin of an illicit tobacco network that was raiding out of Melbourne, and he continued to direct it from Iraq, where he's still in prison actually. And essentially that network, through financial links, went back to the IRGC. So they were directing fire bombings. There was over 230 fire bombings. Like I said, a bombing of a synagogue in Melbourne and an Israeli restaurant. And our own Prime Minister came out and recognised the linkages between the IRGC and this particular tobacco organised crime gang, head of our federal police, as well as the head of our domestic intelligence service. So I think it's a great case study for us around demonstrating the true linkages between nation-state actors and organised crime, particularly in the illicit tobacco space, because it is low risk, high reward. And so some countries have taken steps to kind of try and flip that narrative by prescribing, for example, the IRGC, which allows them, investigators, to use terrorist financing laws to kind of investigate more, have better prosecution kind of outcomes and things like that.
So the IRGC running the illicit tobacco industry in Australia is presumably then just a tip of the iceberg. What do we see here in Europe? What are you seeing in terms of state actor linkages here?
Yeah. Are you familiar with the Foxtrot Network?
I'm about to be.
Right. Okay. So similar thing in Sweden, an individual, Majid, was the head of that. And we saw similar things where, outlaw motorcycle gangs and serious organised crime gangs were being utilised. So if you picture it, they're a pre-existing network that already run, whether it be narcotics or illicit tobacco or human trafficking, wildlife trafficking, whatever it might be. They've got really good infrastructure, financial infrastructure, transport, safe houses. These things are pre-existing. So as a nation-state actor that's looking to achieve certain outcomes, whether that be financial by, selling illicit tobacco or moving illicit tobacco, or particular, outcomes they want for particular issues that they have, they're leaning into pre-existing networks. And think about organised crime gangs. They will sell to the highest bidder. They're in it for the money. We always have to think about the why. Why is somebody doing this? What's the purpose of it? And in many of these cases for the organised crime gangs, it is simply about money. That's all it is. But for these state actors like IRGC, there are ideological reasons for them to be doing this, as well as fiscal. So that convergence we're seeing kind of pop up everywhere, and it's not new. I mean, we've seen historically Hezbollah, which is linked to the IRGC as well, operating within organised crime networks and the sale of illicit products for close to a decade. So I think people are paying more attention now for several reasons. One, the conflict in the Middle East obviously has increased an interest in this space. But two, the fact that that case in Australia with Hamad and then the Foxtrot Network has shown us actual tangible evidence of the direct linkages. So it's no longer a taxation issue, it is no longer a public health issue, it is a national security issue.
So we've talked a little bit about networks that run out of Iran and the Middle East. I've been talking to a journalist online who's been working with illicit white factories in Belarus. So I'm kind of a little bit interested, particularly from a European perspective.
Look, I have to say it's not an area of my expertise, and I would be remiss to comment on it, I think. What I can comment on is that we're looking at about 60% of the factory workers within some of these factories and farms, like in Spain, that are making the illicit tobacco, individuals that are caught up in, illegal migration. They are being kind of used by these organised crime gangs to, deliver the product, to build the product, to make it, to grow it. And so they're kind of victims. So I always like to really highlight that there are a lot of victims in the cycle of this whole trade, that I think it's really important that when there's raids that happen on these places, that we consider that these individuals be treated as victims rather than criminals. They're sold a story. People don't just leave a country on a small boat for no reason. They've either got really difficult financial issues or they're caught up in a war-torn conflict, and we don't understand because we haven't been in that position. So I think it's very important that we never forget the human aspect of these issues. It's not just about taxation, it's not just about government getting money or big tobacco or whatever, or public health. It is a national security issue, and it is a very human issue with a lot of vulnerable people in it.
Walk me through what a typical illicit supply chain looks like. You mentioned Spain,
right,
for example, which is not the first place I thought.
Let me take you down a different one, all right?
Okay.
I'm going to take you down a different one that at Crime Stoppers International.
You've been media trained.
Okay. So there's something at Crime Stoppers International we call the illegal empire, and it is a $4.2 trillion industry that is linked to not only illicit tobacco but counterfeit goods of all kinds, whether that be prescription drugs, whether that be handbags, clothes. If you think of the Charlie Hebdo attacks, that was linked to counterfeit Nike sneakers that were sold. That's how they bought their weapons. So people that purchase those counterfeit Nike sneakers actually helped the terrorists buy their weapons, right? And so there's this whole ecosystem. So say you buy a counterfeit handbag. Linked to that is a whole lot of victims, right? You've got the people that are the young girl that's chained to a sewing machine for 16 hours a day making that. And the profit from that goes to a gun runner, which then goes to a tobacco smuggler, right? Which then goes to a human trafficker who's trafficking girls as young as 9 as sex slaves, right? Who are all victims caught up in this ecosystem. So it is a very, very toxic, horrible kind of ecosystem for vulnerable people, women, children. There are obviously men caught up in it too. I'm not saying they're not, but disproportionately women and children are affected by this more so. And I think it's really important when we, like I said, when we talk about this, that we think about all those different impacts across the whole ecosystem and the people that are impacted by it.
Okay. But I do want to push you a little bit on the sort of specific nicotine.
Nicotine.
And maybe we can kind of merge those two narratives together, right? So talk me through the experience of pick a victim of that particular supply chain, pick a few of them, give them names, give them faces. And tell me what they experience.
Right, so we've got Abdul Hamad, who's come out from, Africa somewhere. And he has been promised this better life. He's paid somebody. He's, come over through a different, all these different networks and arrived in Europe. And the promise isn't real. He's arrived and it's not true. He's not going to be free. He's not going to be able to do this thing he was promised he was going to do. And it's not the life he thought he was going to have. All of a sudden, he's being shipped down to Spain to work on a tobacco farm. And who can he report to? They say you have to stay. You've got a debt bondage. Right? You have to keep working until you can pay us back for all the expenses for your trip to come over here. So he has to continue to work on that farm under debt bondage for a very, very long time. And, then let's say there's a raid on that farm and he's arrested as a criminal for working on that illicit tobacco farm. And
I have no way of proving what happened before.
Right, and he's also not well liked by the community because he's targeted as an illegal immigrant who's responsible for bad things, right? So how do you get people like that and change the kind of trajectory? Warn them before they come, prevent them from coming? I'm not sure what the answer is. Right?
Before we get there,
right.
So Abdul has grown this tobacco on a Spanish farm. And then it goes into some other network somewhere. So presumably somebody then has a factory somewhere with, so who's involved there?
Yeah, so that's a mixture of organised crime gangs, essentially, outlaw motorcycle gangs, etc. And they're running that factory. Within that factory, we've got more vulnerable people, mostly 60% illegal migrants that are working in that factory as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then the product is then made.
Yes.
It's packaged.
Yep.
And then how's it distributed?
It's distributed through their organised crime networks, like their narcotics are, although it's a little bit easier than the narcotics.
So we're in Brussels, which you, as I'm sure you are aware, is where all the cocaine comes from on this continent right now. It's a huge issue here. We've had ministers to describe the place as I think the phrase he used was a narco state.
Right.
At one point. And there must therefore be a link between the organised crime that's happening around cocaine at the port of Antwerp and the illicit cigarette market.
Absolutely.
That is pervasive here because we have high taxes.
Yep.
So how do those two organisations link into each other?
They're probably the same one. They're using the same transport, the same financial flows and the same people to move everything. So they're all intertwined, quite frankly.
Okay. Now, crime's always going to happen.
Yes.
Nobody thinks that this goes away.
No.
Because there will always be a profit motive.
Yes.
So all we can do is manage the problem.
Yeah. Reduction of harm, I think, is the most important thing.
Okay. How do we reduce the harm from the illicit trading, all of these different kinds of goods?
Yeah, look, I think if I had the actual answer to that, I could probably, do a lot.
But there isn't an answer.
No,
right?
it's not.
There are a number of strategies.
Right. Do you know what I think? I think public-private partnership is the key. Organised crime gangs, they work well together and they adopt technology. Well, we're still discussing if we legislatively can use a technology to investigate criminals and things. We cannot do it law enforcement agencies cannot do it alone. They're under-resourced and they don't have all the technology that they need to fight these criminal actors. Enter private sector who do have the capability, who have the money, who have the expertise, and then places like not-for-profits like ours that are able to provide anonymous community reporting into that workflow. I think we just all need to work together and find novel ways and not be scared to try new things.
What's the commercial incentive for these private actors and the public-private partners?
Social good. You'll find that in most of these businesses, there are people that actually are mission-driven.
Which kind of businesses are we talking about here?
Well, it could be anything from cybersecurity companies to pharmaceuticals to tobacco to whatever it might be. People have genuinely good motivations, or they know somebody that's been scammed, or their mother was a victim of something that happened, or whatever it might be. So it's really learning about the motivators of people. Majority of the time, yes, you obviously need to look at ways that there's a ROI for a company or whatever it might be. But in most instances, it's the social good. It's this is what we're doing to help combat this systemic crime issue that we have. For some of the industry, obviously, it's helpful to them to reduce things like illicit tobacco. But I don't think that we should treat that as a bad thing and be like, well, they're only doing it because it helps their bottom line. Who cares? If it reduces crime, let's do it.
You talked about what different motivations for people. What's your motivation? Tell me a little bit about you. And were you a police officer? How did you?
No.
How did we all end up here today?
How did we end? I don't know how I ended up.
Other than the flight and the jet lag.
The 36-hour flight. Yeah.
I'm thinking a little bit more, longer term.
Yeah. So I started out in the Australian intelligence community working counter-terrorism. And then I worked in the private intel consulting sector in the US for 8 years, helping to protect C-suite, IP protection, physical penetration testing, all sorts of things. So I've kind of worked every kind of vertical of the security sector. And for me, it comes back to where I started, and that's national service, and a mission focus on protecting people and seeing harm reduction generally. So, Crime Stoppers International is obviously a natural kind of transition for me in the global fight against crime, really.
Okay. Being a woman in a largely male-dominated security, which I guess I know nothing in security. Actually. I'm guessing.
Right.
It's largely male-dominated.
Right.
Right. But what's your experience of? I guess. As a man, I have no idea how to ask this question.
Just ask. What's the question?
Becoming successful as a woman in a very male-dominated sector. I guess the question is, what can we learn from that experience?
Look, for me, it's been. I think there's a mixture. There's a mixture of luck, but when luck presents itself, grabbing it with both hands and running with it, right, not just watching it disappear. I've always had very good mentors and sponsors. So people that have put me forward, people that have recognised a capability or something and said, Hayley would be good for this opportunity or whatever. And so I think from my perspective, now that I sit on the other end of that, ensuring that I offer opportunities to people, and visibility, I guess, amongst my colleagues to ensure that they get the same opportunities I have.
Okay. Hayley, thank you so much for joining me.
You're very welcome.
Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.